What's going on, young world? You are now rocking with the Now or Never podcast, the intersection of business, faith, and culture. This week's guest is none other than Steve Chaparro, a thought leader. Architectural design is his background, but now it's going into more cultural design, and I'll let him speak to that a little bit. But Steve Chaparro, welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing? How's your afternoon been?
It's been good. It's been busy. This is actually giving me a little bit of a break to have a chat. And
so you're gonna let me do all the work?
Yeah, do all the work.
Want to thank you for being on the podcast, and I have the opportunity and the privilege of getting to know you in personal friendship. Yeah. But part of this podcast was I wanted to give our listeners a little insight about Steve Chaparro. We think, thought leader, business coach, all these different titles. But talk to us a little bit more about your upbringing. How does that play into your life now?
Yeah.
Where were you born and raised? Let's go back there.
Yeah. So I was born in Chicago, so I'm a Midwest boy. So I kind of went around sort of the Chicagoland area up into Wisconsin for the first 5 years. My dad was a pastor, so would move around to the different assignments that he had. Then when I was 5, we moved to Michigan. And so from the ages of 5 to 15, that's where we lived. So basically that's where I grew up, in Michigan. Again, different cities. Being that my dad was a pastor, we were not in one place for very long. I lost count at living in 35 different houses.
30? Seriously?
Yeah.
Hold up. 35 different
35. I lost count after that. So 35 different houses. And I went to 9 different schools.
How long was that time frame? Sorry.
Well, probably, I would say, I don't know where 35 left off. Because when we moved to California when I was 15, the move around still continued, but it was in the Inland Empire of California or Southern
Was he an
California.
evangelist? Was this?
So no, it just he was his sort of ministry was that he would take on assignments to go to a church for say 3 years. He would help it restabilize, or he would bridge a transition that they were under, and then once it was stabilized and growth, he would be assigned to a different church. So he wasn't an evangelist. He was definitely more of a teacher. Was bivocational, so always had a full-time job outside of that. So it was actually for me. I don't know if it just messed with my personality. I didn't mind moving around so much.
It's your personality.
it was just part of it. Helped shape the way I kind of view the world, and how I deal with change. Frankly, how I thrive on change. So it was a good upbringing. So we moved out here to California when I was 15. That was almost over 30 years ago now.
Okay.
Do the math. And been in Southern California ever since.
So you talking about like how you've gone to and from the Midwest to Michigan to California, and you've lost count 35, yeah. Right? But you did use a word. You said you somewhat thrive on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think different people will respond to that instability in different ways. Yeah. I know that I responded to it differently than even my sisters.
Yeah.
I think I had some things that were to my advantage that helped me make that transition a little bit easier, in that I was in sports. Mm-hmm. I'd moved to a new school and I joined football, basketball, and baseball team, and I had immediate friends. So I didn't have a problem making friends necessarily, because I could run with a new crew wherever I went because I just joined a team.
So it sounds like you had a lot of adaptability.
Yeah, and I think part of it is my personality. I do love new things.
Yeah.
I do love new environments. I do love learning about not so much how the game is played, but like to just survey the land, meaning people, and see where I fit in. And I don't think it was necessarily me losing who I was at all. I think it was how can I contribute to wherever I went.
So you're, talking about how you can contribute to wherever you went. How did the contributions of, I don't say contributions, but the influences of your father in ministry, how did that contribute to your life? Like, we talked about moving around, but faith, how did that contribute?
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. I would say that the church environment that I grew up in, that my dad was a pastor in, so he was somewhat shaped himself by the environment that we were in, being part of a large fellowship that was nationwide, in fact, worldwide. I remember from my earliest memory was actually being 4 years old at this large evangelistic crusade, and a lot of the big names in our fellowship came, and I remember my first interactions with a lot of them. I remember my first time really feeling like I had connected with God in a very spiritual way was at the age of 4. In some cases, maybe I was mimicking the men that I saw.
Of course.
But there was a model for me. There was like an aspiration, like these are men that I respect. These are men that I want to be like them. And I don't know that I necessarily knew why, but there was a deep sense of respect that I saw. And my dad shaped me more than he knows. And I try to tell him as much as I can, but his love for people, his love to come alongside people, his love to make them feel comfortable, his love for teaching, his love for communication. I mean, for me as a speaker right now, there are a lot of lessons that still ring in my ears about things that he said to me. Things like connect with the audience, make sure you're looking at them in the eyes, even if you're leading worship or you're in a band in front of people. If you're not connecting with them through your eyes, you're off in your own world.
Yeah.
And you're just a performer. Performers don't always connect with people.
Correct.
Well, some people might have a difference of opinion about that, but and so there was a ton of influence that he had. Now, I would say that for the first, so I don't know if, being that this is kind of at the intersection of faith, culture, and business, our audience is probably going to understand that for me, I was baptized at the age of 10, fully my decision, one of my first really encounters with God. But it wasn't until the age of 15 that I actually adopted this faith as my own, as opposed to the faith of my parents. So I would say between the ages of 10 and 15, I was shaped by the faith of my parents. But at the age of 15, I adopted this as my own. And I remember, all through the high school years and even through college years, I had professors that would challenge me and say, no, you need to believe on your own. You need to challenge your beliefs. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, this is my choice. Like, I have chosen this. I have had multiple opportunities to reject it.
Yeah.
And this is my faith, and I've adopted it. This is my own.
So in choosing that and being challenged, how do you take that now into, post-adolescence, right? So now you're in a career world, and talk to us a little bit about what your career looks like. Because I know you post-30-ish.
Yeah.
I've come into a friendship with you last 7 years. But prior to that, I hear a lot of different things about what Steve is, what Steve does. You know what I mean? But you're good at all of them, or you're good at a lot of them. And, I gotta believe that, your father was a teacher, and I see a lot of resemblance in who you are, in your teaching ability. Whether it's performative or not, I don't believe it's performative. I think you really do connect with an authenticity. But talk to us a little bit about what your career was like. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I can go back to when I was 15, and we had an assignment in high school, my freshman year. Okay, just pick a career, pick some type of vocation, and write a paper about it. I don't know what it was, but I chose an architect to write about. So I did my research. That was in my 9th grade year in Michigan. I came over to California, In my 10th grade year, I did more research with my new counselor, and I decided at 10th grade, this is what I want to do. It inspires me. There's something, I don't know what it was. I mean, I didn't have words for it, but so I chose by that time to go to architecture school. So I went to architecture school here in LA. Fight on. And I went to the 5-year program, and I remember, like I was talking with my son the other day, they told us the first day of that program, 1 in 10 of you will finish this program.
Wow.
It's that hard. Literally, after that day, some people just said, you know what,
So what did you think? What did you think about when you heard that?
Like I'm like, bring it on. Like
Okay.
I like he's like, you couldn't have made me want this even more.
Yeah.
Like that did not dissuade me. It actually made me want it more.
Yeah. Prove you wrong, right? Like.
Well, it's not even. It could be a part of it. Prove you wrong, but it's like, for me, I love mountain peaks.
Okay.
Okay. I would say that I'm addicted to climbing mountains.
So the hard work.
It's hard work.
Is it the process that you're addicted to, or is it
I love the challenge.
The achievement.
I love the challenge. I love the achievement. Fact, to the point. But the thing is, I don't rest in those achievements.
Got it.
Like literally.
Let's just use. Do you find new mountains to climb?
Yeah, exactly. It's literally, if I were to climb a mountain, I'd spend like 5 minutes just like, dude, that is awesome. All right, what's the next
So
mountain?
let me ask you this. So with that, like, is there a downfall to that or a downside?
Of course.
What have you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, my sisters even told me, because I was a church junior high pastor, and my sisters actually were with me on that team. And we would, have some great successes, great moments. And I was like, okay, but we got to do it better. We got to do it at the next event. And they told me even way back then, Steve, you got to like just enjoy the moment, like enjoy what has been accomplished. So I'm not even sure it's about the accomplishment as it is getting over the hump. And then it's like pushing yourself or the organization beyond its former limits. For me, it's about growth, it's about challenge, it's about transformation. Like, if I can't see progress, if I can't see transformation in anything that I do, it's very hard for me to pay attention.
Yeah.
To stay involved, to stay passionate. I'm driven by passion. I'm driven by growth. And absolutely, that has a lot of downfall to that, or at least there's a downside to that, rather.
Mm-hmm. So what the key thing that stood out for me was that transformative, and it sounds like your life, or just being on the outside looking in, has been a transformative experience through every step of the way. We look at, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we look at 2020, very transformative in many ways. Talk to me a little bit about your family. You got a wife, you got 2 kids.
Yeah.
You're coming from a largely ministerial family. You're getting married. You're going through the USC program. How has your family adapted to Steve?
Well, I think it's been a two-way adaptation, because I think early on in my marriage, I think early on in any marriage, I think any one of the spouses will say, Lord, can you please change her or him to be more like me? It's the wrong prayer. And it's even wrong to say, Lord, change me to be like them.
Yeah.
I think, and so it's really, I think, and I've learned that the hard way, because I think we've had some really frank conversations, and I have been not just accused, but I've actually been the bully in my marriage.
Yeah.
Where I am so determined, I'm going to conquer that hill, I'm going to start that business, I'm going to do whatever, I'm going to do it. Like, that's a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I'm so passionate about this. This would make me really happy, and her just giving in because she doesn't want to disappoint the bear.
Mm-hmm.
and so I've had to learn that sometimes people will give in, not because they agree, but because they just don't want to deal with you. And so I've had to learn that it's not about her aligning to me or me aligning to her. It's about us aligning with him, and then us living a life in a marriage that is thriving. So it's tough. It's tough as you figuring stuff out about yourself, about your spouse and how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I could even say in my own personal life, it's been a roller coaster with family because I am, we talk a lot about the Enneagrams, right? And I'm an Enneagram 3, and it's an achiever. So I achieve one thing, and I'm off to the next. Okay, what can I achieve? And unfortunately, there's a sense of value there that's tied into it, which some things I don't like about myself, and I kind of put my I can self-disclose with you, or with the audience, obviously. You put your family on autopilot, hoping they don't crash. Yeah. You know what I mean? And a lot of times we've gotten into some accidents. You know what I mean? So I can imagine going through your trajectory of who you are. Mountaintops and peaks. It could be hurtful at times. And how does Steve reconcile that through the years?
Yeah, I would say so. Part of this has been some really hard realizations, really tough conversations. I have a friend, I keep talking about him, Sam, I'm going to talk about you again. We had a conversation, and he was asking. We were talking about just our dreams of life, and he and I were very similar. And when you find somebody that thinks like you, that pains like you, you're like immediate friends.
Yeah.
And so we were actually working together at that time, and he asked me, Steve, what is it that you desire most for others? For me, the answer was immediate. Oh, I want to help people undergo transformation. And he looked at me and he says, have you found that for yourself?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how I felt. It's was I don't know if it was a knife, a hot branding iron, a bat, but oh, dude, so I realized in that moment that, and I think it's a universal truth, that which you desire most for others, or that you desire to do for others, is that which you also desire for yourself. And for me, transformation is what it's about. And it was literally, I needed to have that conversation at that moment in time, because a couple of months later, I was going to get laid off.
Yeah.
And the work that I thought I was going to do for others, I had to do for myself first. Yeah. And it was some really hard realizations. I remember sending out a list of questions to 10 of my closest friends and family, and asking them some really tough questions. What do you see that I'm good at? What's one thing I need to work on? What's a skill that I take for granted? All these other things. And on one hand, it was very affirming. On the other hand, it was a gut check. I tell people that I was literally sick to my stomach for 2 weeks because I had to face some of those ugly truths.
So how long ago was this?
I'd say it was probably around the time that we met.
It's about 7 years ago.
Actually, it was a little bit after.
Because we were talking, because you just brought up about being laid off.
Yeah.
So I remember being in that season of your life.
Yeah.
So you're walking through all this, right? You graduate. Let's go back. You have the experience as being a PK. You go through USC, the architectural design. You're getting married during the season. And now you're fast forward, and I know you used to live in Rancho. Mm-hmm. You're over here in Long Beach, good old LB to the, now we get down. So you're here in Long Beach, it's got an energy, unmatched energy of culture and just a lot of things that me and you can identify with. So you're going through all these things. Do you have a mentor? Is there somebody that you talk to?
That's a good question. I think I've had unofficial mentors. I've had people that have played important roles in my life. It wasn't necessarily like, hey, hey, can you be my mentor? Can you do this? There was a time though that I was probably upset with a certain individual that I really looked up to, and that I hoped through osmosis that he would understand that I really wanted him to mentor me in ministry. And I held a little bit of a grudge, and I think it was a little bit of an unfair expectation. And actually, there was a pastor here, Bill White, here in Long Beach, when I was sharing this conversation with him, and he says, it's kind of unfair to expect that one person would be the end-all mentor to you.
Yeah.
He says, what I would suggest that you think about, and it was a book that I forget the name of the book, but the concept was that you seek a constellation of mentors. That it's a group of people that each one of them will play a different type of role in your life. It might be a business coach, it might be a health trainer, it might be a spiritual director, it might be a pastor, it might be accountability partner. All of these people in your life, so that you're constantly looking for people that can help you, but also that you can help them.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of puts the pressure off of trying to find that one magic mentor.
Yeah.
But I think I definitely could have some mentors that are a little bit more official.
I can attest to that, because I had lunch with one of my pastors 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, and he made the same recommendation of having mentors like in different layers, like or unofficial mentors, but people you can go to for certain things, and people you can just dump on, but not in a toxic way, but stuff that you can just let out on. And then some that you can go to when you need spiritual guidance. And then another person that you can just talk business and sports with.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer in that. And, just thinking about like your trajectory, it's interesting to hear you say that it needed, because I think we've all done that, right? Or some of us have done that, where we place unrealistic expectations on people.
Yeah, and I think that goes for any type of relationship, whether it's a mentor type of relationship, a friend, a spouse.
We do that all the time.
I mean, I remember, in counseling a young man before, he had come to us because his girlfriend had stepped out on him, and a few months later he found he was in another relationship, and he was over the moon, and he said, man, this girl is everything to me, like the whole Jerry Maguire, she completes me. And I had to stop him right there, and I said, bro, there is no one single person, no spouse that will complete you, that will be everything you need, because if you think that they are, you've placed them on a pedestal of a god, and they're prone to disappoint you. Unfortunately, that girl stepped out on him as well, and it crushed him. But it was because, frankly, it's the idolatry of people sometimes.
Yeah.
That we can put people up there.
We have all these expectations, and people are going to fail other people, including we're going to fail people. So going through all this and talking about your mentorship and or mentors, mentees. Where is Steve at now in his career? I think we've progressed there. What is Steve doing now, or what has he done in the last couple of years?
So, my last former role was at an architecture firm, and I had actually started my career in architecture, and then 15 years later came back to it after having been away for 10 years. And then I realized that I wanted to use those skill sets to help organizations actually design their culture and the way they operate it. Winston Churchill has my favorite quote. He says, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." So I wanted to do for architecture, do for companies what I used to do for buildings. Awesome. And that is to shape organizations that begin to shape the people that work in them. So that's what I do now, although 2020 has been an interesting year.
2020, man.
So between culture design and keynote speaking, and I have a podcast of my own.
What's the name of your podcast? We've got to give
Culture Design Show.
Culture Design Show. We can find that on all the platforms?
Yep.
Dope. We talk about 2020, right? It's like a cuss word around here. Like I've had a couple interviews today, and when we get to the 2020, it was like, nothing happened the way we wanted to, and nothing was planned out. What has Steve learned the most about himself in 2020?
Yeah, there's one word that rises to the top for me, and it's a word that has come up in our life group. It's a word that comes up, in James 1 when it talks about patience. Patience, because as a driver, as a Type A personality, you much of your success comes from your drive. This has been a reminder of lessons I've had to learn in different seasons of my life, where there will be times in life where the success that came from your driving will no longer give fruit. It won't no longer come. And there's anxiety that comes from that, because anxiety comes when you can't control something. You can't control the outcome, you can't control a business, you can't control somebody's reaction. And so that anxiety comes up. And so I think for me, I'm sometimes driven by frustration. And so I've had to learn patience.
2020.
Patience,
huh?
It's just about it's an asterisk year. It's like a Barry Bonds year, bro.
I got like 3 asterisks for one for every month, probably.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked a lot about your upbringing and your career. I know off record, me and you talk a lot about mental health and about family dynamics and just all those things that come along with it. What does Steve do to take care of his mental health? What does Steve do to take care of himself away from the hyperactive, career-focused ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be careful that even in the realm of self-care, I can be hyper diligent too.
Yeah, of course. It's just our nature, right?
There are, so I go through seasons where I'm really good at self-care, but then it results in me being exhausted because I'm so focused on self-care.
Yeah.
I mean, there was back in August, I was very vigilant about getting up in the morning, spending time in prayer, journaling, planning out my day in the morning, and even doing exercise. So those are the 3 things that I would generally do to keep myself, but I just go too hard. And so I sometimes get burned out taking care of myself.
You go hard in the mental health sphere?
Yeah. Because I have to be, sometimes it takes such a disciplined effort to do that.
It's work, yeah.
So I haven't figured it out necessarily. Like, how do I cool my jets as I'm trying to take care of myself? I mean, that's a lifelong lesson. I mean, my dad, I've always been this way. And I'm always filling up my calendar. I'm always emptying my energy bucket. And then when I realize it, because something happens, I say, okay, I gotta empty my calendar a bit, drop 2 or 3 things here just to create some margin. And my dad says, leave the margin. Don't fill the margin back up.
Yeah.
Just because you took time to rest. And that's my problem. So even my self-care can be hyper diligent. And so I'm trying to figure it out.
You're working through it, right?
Yeah.
How has your family kept you grounded?
Yeah. So I remember one time, and I've mentioned this, I've talked about this before, being, on the road, flying everywhere, having dinners with people, having, giving talks or giving workshops or trying to close business. I love that stuff. There's just something about that is frankly, it's fun. It's tiring. It's grueling. It's not always, sometimes it's a grind. But at one time, I found myself on my couch on a Saturday morning, missing the grind.
Wow.
And I was so frustrated because I was doing nothing.
Wow. And
I was like, man, I'm not having a coffee with somebody. I'm not doing this. I'm not. And then it's like something told me, bro, just turn your head to the left. And there was my son. My son, who was there just like I had been gone for most of the week. And my son was there, and I'm like, what do you mean there's nobody here?
Yeah.
Like, my son is here. And I felt so convicted, and I apologized to him. And I said, I'm sorry that we're not having this fun day, that we're not off going to do something. And he says, Dad, I'm just glad you're here.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, even in my type A personality, I sometimes think that I've got to do these grandiose things to wow my son or my sons. And sometimes it's just about, my dad was home.
They just want you to be present, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard for people that are hyper productive or hyper, to your point, filling up the calendar. I even look at my daughters and I'm like, a lot of times I'm on my phone and they're coming of age right now and they're like, Daddy's home. And I'm like, dude, that's so dope. And Zoe's already going to be 5. And I'm like, that just a flash, a flash. So, I can understand the struggle of being present, but the vitalness of being present.
Yeah.
Because our kids don't care what we do.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a matter of whether or not we were with them and we spent time. There's, I think there's a culture that we can buy into, that we have to take all the trips, that we have to take them here and there, and those are, good. But I think that's just baggage to what's really important.
Yeah.
We can still do those things if we remember what's really important. There's nothing wrong with those. I wish I could do more of that.
Yeah.
But when we dismiss the power of just being present and just noticing them and being off our phone, yeah.
Yeah, the good old media, just chuck that thing. Sometimes, our kids need us, right? In closing, I'm going to ask this. I asked all our guests this question, but what is the one piece of life advice that you would give our listeners, our viewers? Steve Chaparro had one opportunity. What would be that life advice?
That life advice. That's a good question. So it comes down to this. So I used to do marathons.
Yeah.
I used to. Not so much anymore. But
I used to produce marathons, so that makes 2 of us.
Okay. So I remember the first time I started training for a marathon. It's 26.2 miles, and I did my first training run on my own around the block, around the neighborhood. And I had my earpods on, and between songs I sounded like Darth Vader because I was breathing so hard, and I thought, man, that was a good run. Like, that got to be 2-3 miles. So I clocked it with my car. It was like barely over a mile. I was like, dude, I got to do 26.2 of these. And I remember someone asked the question is like, how do you run a marathon? One step at a time. So I think it's think big, but start small. And it's just like, you can have big goals, but just know that it's just take one step at a time. It doesn't matter when you finish. It doesn't matter how fast you finish. It just matters that you finish.
Yeah.
And so I just take life one day at a time. Seriously, in 2020, one day at a time. There have been some really hard seasons in my life that I've had to take not just one day at a time. Sometimes it's 1 hour at a time. So whatever that step means to you, just take it one step at a time.
That's beautiful advice, man. I take that. You've expressed that to me probably twice in the last week. You're like, Bob, stay, one step at a time, homie. So I appreciate that, and our listeners and viewers, I'm sure that they would appreciate that. And you guys need to take that nugget of advice and put it on a notepad or on your refrigerator or something. Your notes in your phone, but definitely take that piece of advice. Steve, where can people find you? Where can people find you? I know you got a couple of platforms that you do some things on. Where can people find Steve Chaparro? Yeah,
so my website is stevechaparro.co, and then on all the socials, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, it's at Steve Chaparro Co.
Also, do you got anything you would like to plug? Anything that you got upcoming or something that?
Yeah, so I've got some business coaching that I do, and so I offer about twice a month. I do these free 2-hour webinars for entrepreneurs that are looking to grow and scale their businesses. So if you go to businessgrowthcoach.co /webinar.
Can you do that one more time?
/webinar. There, you can sign up for one. I've got those a couple of times a month, and so I'd love for people to head over there because that's some really good, solid stuff for people that are looking to do that type of work.
Awesome. I mean, you have our support. We're here at the Gray LB Studios. Guys, Steve Chaparro, an amazing individual, a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of wisdom that is few and far between to come by. So, again, let's give it up for our guest, Steve Chaparro. Thank you again.
Appreciate it, man.
We appreciate having you here. You are now rocking with the Now or Never podcast. Support, hit the subscribe button. Peace and blessings.
Peace.